Welcome to After Deadline, the media podcast. I'm Mark Silverstein.
And I'm Kathy Fowler.
We are veteran TV news reporters who turn to the dark side as PR and marketing gurus.
This week, we have a very special guest, a veteran in the business. She has over 30 years of experience as a journalist and has recently become an author.
She's got quite a journey.
Yeah. And full transparency, she's a friend and a former colleague. I used to work with her at Channel 7 in Washington, D.C. We're excited to welcome Alisa Parenti, breaking news editor at Bloomberg News, to the show. Thanks for joining us, Alisa. It's been, we could sit here and reminisce about our old days at Channel 7, but we have way more important questions.
No, I want to hear about Channel 7 in a second. All right. So okay. So I got a question. You're in charge of breaking news, breaking business news, right?
It's interesting because it's slightly shifted. I'm at Bloomberg News, and for the longest time I was covering business news, which Bloomberg does on the radio. And in January, I started with the speed desk. So print guys have what they call a speed desk, and it's headline writing and blast writing, and it's general news out of DC. So I'm covering President Biden, the regulatory agencies, trade sanctions, elections, midterms, those kinds of things. Whereas before I was more strictly focused on the market.
Okay. So the fact that as we speak, Elon Musk is firing people at this very minute. I mean, this may date us when you probably listen to the show, but it doesn't matter. You can listen and see how it turned out. At this, like thousands of people are losing their job by email. That's not something you would be on top of at this minute, or is it? And if you need to go to cover that story, we'll wait.
Let me say, Mark, it's such a good point because Twitter impacts so many people, and Twitter is a fundamental way that the speed desk and reporters, breaking news reporters, get news. And the Twitter story and Elon Musk has been a huge business story. So the reality is that, yes, there are folks at Bloomberg who are covering today's momentous action in which he closed the offices down and fired half the staff and is going wholesale, and I understand taking, his adversaries, taking back their handles and such. But for our purposes, we've spent quite a bit of time figuring out how in the world are we going to verify tweets? How are we going to? There's already so much misinformation that's pushed through that platform. How will we be able to vet information as we approach the midterms? And again, I don't know when folks will be listening to this, but we're very much concerned about election security and information security as well as we approach this big election.
Do you think that you'll have to no longer use Twitter as a big source? Because who knows what? I mean, I can't believe even Elon Musk, one of his first tweets after he bought it was, it was talking about, Paul Pelosi and whether he was drunk or not, or so. I'm just like, what kind of irresponsible action is that to like throw out some crazy accusation that's not vetted? And this is now the guy who owns Twitter. I mean, this is insane.
Kathy, so much so stunningly awful. I saw the same tweet, and just that this is, Chief Twit, as he calls himself. One of the things I do have to do now with this new position is watch his feed and watch what he's tweeting. And it is frightening. Some of it seems very unhinged and scary. It's also scary to think about that much concentrated wealth. I don't mean to sound naive, but that's a lot of wealth all smushed into one person.
Concentrated wealth and now concentrated power over information, is just too much. That's like,
but is Twitter really, I mean, especially after he's gutting it now and reshaping it, is it? Yes. It seems to me that, I'm on Twitter all day long with my big 300 followers. So, I'm not worried about the $8 a month check that I can pay for or not pay for, because no one wants to verify me. But I mean, don't we get a little too Twitter centric? This is on Twitter now. Everybody has to rush and report what's going on in there. I mean, isn't it kind of
I don't know.
Is it overdone?
But at least it doesn't, it does end up, it drives some of the news cycles, right? Like,
I
can you
don't want
avoid
to.
it?
I don't want to insult my $300 either.
It does drive the news cycle more than I even anticipated. I think less so in the broadcast world, or at least in my broadcast world prior to this, where I was doing business news. We kind of covered Elon and Twitter as a CEO in a company, a founder in a company, like we would, Elon and Tesla. But now when this is a main way that public officials are communicating, be they Nancy Pelosi or Elizabeth Warren or Secretary Raimondo, whatever the case is, this is the way they're dispensing information. And it has become shorthand, and all the news desks are completely, they've got those handles coming directly into our views. So what will happen, I do think that we may see a swing back. We look at being first on calling races and all of that situation. I know that I will be looking to websites as much as, if not more than Twitter handles, where that might not have been the case 6 months ago. The way we would just not being able to vet Twitter, I'm going to have to turn to websites more often than I would have in the past to verify information, and even as an initial source of information.
I have an exclusive for you. The Powerball is now up to 1.6 billion, and I'm going to win it and then buy Twitter. So you can go with that.
Okay. Actually, I will be stopping by and getting a ticket though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why
now,
not?
Kathy,
Okay.
will you call Mark the chief twit if he does do all those things?
Calls me a lot worse. Trust me.
That half the time is
That's a compliment.
that is true. All right, so let's go back a little bit. You began your reporter or your days in journalism as a reporter, moved on to anchoring. Along the way, you were on radio. Now you're editor, at Bloomberg. Out of all those roles, is there one role, like it seems like you've sort of done it all? Can you talk a little bit about how you got into journalism and which role you sort of like the best, or did you enjoy all of them as a part of the journey?
It's hard to choose favorites, right, between our children. But I do have to say that this last year, I had an opportunity to get a book published. And I don't think of that so much as journalism. It was a historical fiction, but more like storytelling. And I have to say that ended up being my favorite of all of it. But there are different pieces of all of those.
The name of the book.
Oh, it's called Betrayal, the Ethel Rosenberg story.
And we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
But make sure if you're an author, you got to drop the name of the book.
See, I got to get better about this stuff, Mark. I need you to come in and help, brand me. This is what needs to happen. But I loved reporting. I loved being in the street and talking to people and the excitement, anchoring, living a little bit more comfortable, structured life. So I think there are different pieces of it. The radio, I love the medium. And that was just really fun. I did that for about 10 years after Channel 7, where I worked with you, Kathy. From there, I went to business radio and worked with some great folks, and many of them are still doing it, doing the thing. So yeah, it's just, I feel like it's such a privilege. I always wanted to be a reporter. I'm kind of one of those people. I would buy into this idea of it being a service and giving voice to stories that would otherwise go untold. I love that about it. And
how old were you when you realized this?
Well, when I was in high school,
or did you work in it?
No, I didn't do that. But when I was in high school, I was running around, basically a kind of, gossipy, nosy, trying to get the scoop on everything going around. And then in college, I had an internship at the CBS affiliate in Chicago. I went to school at Northwestern, and one election night in the 80s, because I am 150 years old. At that time, it was an upset on election night, and I was at the winning candidate for, Cook County clerk or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they pay people to do this. This is amazing. I mean, it was just so much excitement and energy. And and then went into local news from there.
So you
Th-
love the storytelling aspect of it and being the first, to deliver the news and spread the news and inform people. I guess it was kind of what was a driving factor.
Well, the Cook County clerk, that's the one who makes sure that the dead people all vote in order.
Now, hey, no slamming Chicago, the way we do it in Chicago.
That's how it happened for the Kennedy election. Wasn't it Cook County that came in late?
Actually, I'm remembering, Mark, it was Cook County Sheriff. And I want to say the guy's name was Jim Ryan. So the enforcer maybe of the election stuff. But yeah, no, to Kathy's points, in all sincerity, it sounds really cheesy and hippy dippy, but I do love that. And I just really like doing something different every day and the opportunity to meet more people and kind of get out there.
How do you feel about now, like when you look at, because journalism has changed so much, and before, to be a journalist, you were trained, you most likely went to college and studied journalism, and then you had to understand the ethics, and now it's like any blogger or anybody on Twitter could be considered and lumped in as a journalist. And I think it really waters down and it hurts the profession. In a way it makes it better, because you have everybody could be a potential journalist, but at the other time, on the other hand, if you look at the other side, the irresponsibility and the misinformation that happens is makes that much more possible.
I agree. And I would also say that while there's been this explosion in the ability to tell stories, as you mentioned, every person could become a reporter. What we have not seen keeping pace with that is news consumers' understanding of what they're consuming and what they're watching. So we have these people who are really personalities on some of the networks, on Fox, on MS, on these places where some of them are very decidedly have a point of view, and their people perceive that they're watching a news program, and they are not. They are watching a political commentary, or and it doesn't even necessarily need to be about politics. But it's definitely a slanted view, and the personality isn't also maybe saying, hey, this is unbiased or whatever. They're not necessarily putting that out there, but they may be appearing on a network that does portray itself as kind of a news source. And so I think one way to fight back, Kathy, would be I would love to see more education of consumers of what is the news that you're consuming, just kind of like, I think we need more personal finance. I know I personally do in high school and college. Here I was like the business reporter that didn't, not I didn't balance my checkbook, but there was like, do what I've learned, what I'm supposed to say, but not necessarily what I do. But in terms of the actual understanding what you're watching, especially just with all this huge, explosion of information, we have not kept pace with ways to understand what you're taking in my opinion.
And what about younger demographics? I mean, are they paying attention to Bloomberg? Or are they? I mean,
watching the news, they consume their news. They're getting stuff on TikTok and
literally
Instagram.
And Snapchat, and those are the places. And I think that if you turn the other way and say, oh, I'm not a journalist on Snapchat, I'm not going to do that. Well, you're kind of spelling your own doom, because these are the consumers of the future. So you've got to find a way to have storytelling that's responsible occur on those other platforms. But yeah, that is where they're getting their news. They're not, the numbers are just amazing to me,
I wish there was an independent body in a way that, I know you had this Twitter certification that now you have to pay $8 for, but it would almost be good if there was an independent body that, that certified journalists, that you were certified, and it meant that you weren't out there, that you were truly trying to. I know it's probably impossible
What are you,
to do.
like TASS, like from the
What?
old Soviet Union.
Could have seal of
You could
approval.
let the government decide who's
No, it's not. It wouldn't be the government. I don't even know. But how do you?
well, don't they do that in England? Isn't that the
I
sort of
don't know. I
yeah.
just know that there are too many people out there sharing misinformation, and there are way too many people who are saying, well, so and so. And I'm like, do you understand who that person is that you're listening to? I mean, it's wild, and it's really impacting. I mean, democracy, you name the issue that we're having in this country, and not just in this country, around the world. It's becoming a huge problem, and people are, using it, like powerful people like Elon Musk, and spreading misinformation helps them, and it's just, I don't know what the answer is, but I know it's a big problem. And if we don't get our arms wrapped around it, I don't know what happens.
I agree with you, and on all points, and I'm not sure what the answer is. One thing would be to make people more aware, or some kind of a vetting system, something there. It would be, I think, hugely helpful.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's jump back for a little bit. Okay, so you're at the CBS O&O, I think, in Chicago, right? Intern.
Yeah. Yes, I was interning.
Interning from, and Northwestern, very impressive.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
That was
Thank you.
nice.
Wildcats.
Were you at the it's Medill there, right?
It is Medill.
Yeah,
Yep. I went there, and actually the best thing I got out of Medill, the grad school program, my husband.
Oh,
Yeah, that poor, long-suffering gentleman. Yeah.
well, if anybody doesn't know, when you say Medill in journalism, that's where people are like, well, I went to Medill. That's
so you knew
that's
already.
like Harvard of
No, I don't. Oh, thank you for saying that. But I don't know if that's true, but thank you.
No, it's the school. That's like saying the Rolls Royce is like the Lincoln of cars.
Are you making fun of me?
No,
I'm trying to explain to people that who may not understand Medill and journalism.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And
so you knew, okay, so you took the gossipy things from high school or whatever, and you knew you wanted to be a journalist, which is why you went to one of the premier journalism schools in the country, and then you're working. So what did, from the CBS station in Chicago, which was a big deal, where did you go?
yes.
So some small.
I did. I went to Syracuse, New York, which is where my husband's from, upstate New York. And so we went there, and I started at Channel 5 there, and it snows a lot in Syracuse.
Yeah.
A lot. Like
that's not a bad market. That's a pretty good.
It was, and interestingly too, like, it was like in the 80s. I think now it's like in the 100s or whatever, just as time has gone on. But so it was great. And I was just a general assignment reporter there. And it was a great place when the kids were little, but boy, the cold and the dreary and the cloudy. I mean, it snowed on Mother's Day. And so I turned to Jim and I said, I'm leaving. You can come with me. But I'm out. I'm done now. It's,
people don't understand when there's a big snowstorm and everybody else has to stay home. It's the journalist who has to get up at 2 a.m. before it snows and then stand out there all day long. And sometimes your mouth is so cold that you can't even form sentences on the air.
I know. And you just and this stuff is hitting you in the face, and you try to get under an awning, and they're like, no, we want to see you out in the elements. I'm like, great. We want to, see you look bad. But so then my husband had an opportunity in DC right around 2000. And so we moved to the DC area, and I started work, got really lucky and got an opportunity at the ABC affiliate, Channel 7, and was there for about 7 years, and also primarily reporting during that time.
And that's where you met Kathy.
And that's where I met Kathy, and just, yeah, she's just, I'm a huge fan of Kathy.
Aww.
Because here's what people may not know. She's great. Obviously, like the public piece of her is amazing, and great storyteller, always has been, always will be. But she's really kind. Like, which is just like, oh, really? Like, I'm not. Okay. I'm noticing, I'm thinking of you two people. And I confess, I may be more like Mark than like Kathy.
Thank you.
This is what I'm starting to see. A little bit of a cynic, a little bit of like, I don't know, how's that going to work? Chicago, Parenti. So yeah, I'm kind of more that. And yeah, but Kathy, for listeners, I would just say she's just like truly a kind, good soul, a great person, and just yeah, there's not many of them in news. So
Aw.
yeah, my memory of her is long lasting and very positive. So
Oh, I was wondering where you were going with this because I was like, it's her
Yeah.
story. That
There's
she's
there a
gonna say.
butt there?
yeah,
But
there's no buts, no buts,
But she
none,
tripped me
zero
on
buts.
the hall on the way to the anchor desk to try to take my job.
No, oh my God, no, no. There's none of that. No sharp elbows coming from Fowler.
Well, so were you, so I'm trying to think if you were, so you are in TV journalism for quite a few years. Do you have any, in DC, Chicago, what are some of the biggest stories or some of the biggest things that you could share with the public to give them insight about journalism? Or is there any like story that you covered that still sticks in your mind, or a story that you could have done better, or a story that you're particularly proud of? Or
so let me
Yeah.
jump in real quick.
Yeah.
Kathy, the whole premise of the show for Kathy is to that we're the PR company for news, for all of news.
oh, that is true. I think that
Oh,
journalism
I love this.
a PR effort. Like really, like
Yeah.
that's why we wanted to start this podcast, is because I'm like, people don't understand journalists. They think that we go in with an agenda. They think that we go in trying to make somebody look bad. And I'm like, you guys have no clue. We just want the story, whatever the story is.
You also wanted to do this podcast so you could have Alisa on to compliment you. I think
Yeah, that was it too. I was like, who will say nice things about me?
It
No,
was a
I
really
swear.
long play.
She's playing a long game. Fowler is.
Yeah.
Long game on this one.
Okay. I'm trying to build my own PR image.
No,
but
yes. So first of all, that's amazing. And I think it's really needed. And here's the other misconception I would argue about journalists is that it's so glamorous, especially, broadcast. It's like, oh, and the lights and everything. Let me tell you, when you're running around in Southeast or whatever, take your city or neighborhood of choice and trying to find a bathroom that's open where you can wash your hands at, before anything's open at 4:35 in the morning. And then racing back to your live shot, and in many cases doing your own makeup and your own hair and trying to stay warm and a million other things. No, it's the glamour, not so much. So what I found, why I've really enjoyed the work, is that I've tried to enjoy every piece of the journey of the day. So, and I've said to students, if you don't like going out chasing sound, interviewing people, which on all of that involves, I mean, they may like unintentionally spit on your face, like they're animated and they're, it's kind of gross. I mean, there's some stuff that's not so pleasant, but if you don't enjoy kind of the opportunity to get out there and talk to different people and put in write and pick your sound and do the pieces of it, you are not going to be happy, because that moment of standing in the lights and kind of being a air quotes star is very fleeting in your day. It's a very small fraction of your day, and you've got to really enjoy the rest of the work. So that's what I would say toward the misconception piece.
The glamour is about a minute.
Literally, yeah.
The rest of it is a lot of grunt work.
Yeah, exactly. But one story that sticks in my mind all these years later was when at Channel 7, I picked up a call into the newsroom, and it was somebody telling me about this woman who had skin cancer and had basically been untreated. She was pregnant and she had fallen into a coma, and her name was Susan Torres. And so they were a Catholic family, and the husband wanted, and her family really wanted for her to stay alive for the birth. The baby inside her was still alive. And so, I think she was at 6 months maybe when she slipped into a coma. And so that story was, I felt so privileged that they let me into their world to share what they were going through. And I think that was kind of the most important story that I had an opportunity to tell. It's not like you could ever choose what it would be, I would never have even thought of such a thing. And I would like to say that it was, oh, I was just developing such great sources that I happened upon this. It was just dumb luck. I just happened to pick up a phone. But I think that those are the stories. And I also got to interview Jim Lovell.
It isn't that you just picked up the phone. You picked up the phone and turned it into a story and followed up.
Well, you also
a lot of people would.
Thank you.
Story.
Yeah.
Wait, Mark, you're getting more like Kathy now. What's going on? You can't, don't get nice on me now. I can't have too nice. Somebody's got to play bad cop here. What's going on?
Very
you guys?
hungry. I'm thirsty for praise.
Thank you. I'll take that. Yeah.
And also, like, people don't realize that when you heard that, you picked up the phone and you heard that story, you had to go to the bosses and say, we have to tell this story, and why. You got to fight for stories in newsrooms, because they're like, well, no, there's a bed bug story, and this would be better. And you have to fight for, why is that important to tell that story? And so you fought for it, and got it on the air.
And this is one of the things that you've brought out really well, I think, in this podcast, this piece, that fighting for stories that matter, and that it's not always obvious, that your management isn't always going to take the stories that need to be told, because they may not necessarily draw eyeballs. They may not be advantageous in terms of building viewership, for a while, different consultants would come through, and not even necessarily in the DC market, but other places I've worked. And it's like, okay, you need to walk and talk. Like, everybody's now suddenly walking somewhere. Where are all these reporters walking? Everybody's on the move. They're walking and they're gesturing. And it's just like, really, what's going on? That's kind of the context. And you're coming in with, like, my gosh, this is life and death. This family is struggling with, and literally, like, when are they going to terminate the life support? She's technically brain dead. They don't want the baby's birthday to be on the same day as when this woman's going to die, and just the courage that's involved in that. And so, I was lucky that I was able to get that, get the time and the photographer, get the crew designated so that I could go cover that, and that they gave me the time to do it. Yeah, for sure.
How did it end up?
The baby was born, and oh my God, this is so weird. I'm going to get emotional, but the baby died after a few weeks. And the mom also died. And so I've thought lately, like, about, I wonder whatever happened with that dad. And that husband and wife had one son who was, I think, like 3 or 4 at the time. It was truly tragic. She had basically untreated skin cancer, and but it's a common name.
And that's the other thing, you move on these stories, but they stick with you. You never find out these things. It's a lot like doctors in a hospital. When they treat a patient, they maybe save a patient, but they're that's it for we parachute into these lives. Sometimes we get bound to them. You
do get emotionally involved.
You do, and then. And then unfortunately, you got to move on to the next story. And you're always like, well, what happened? Yeah.
What happened to that person? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
But no, I'm glad you told that story. That's, and that's where you make a difference. And did you was there a public reaction? Did you hear from people?
People did really respond and wanted to hear more about them. And, talked about praying for them, and the family was very receptive. The husband in particular was particularly appreciative. And so that was just kind of the best experience, one of them that I can remember. I really felt positive about that.
The other thing is, you probably, by giving information about the undetected skin cancer, think of all the people who went, wait a minute, I cannot ignore that thing on my skin. So in a way, her story probably saved other lives. And who knows how many lives, that it could have impacted and prevented somebody else from going through the same thing, which is what we try to do in journalism as well, is make a difference. And those stories make a difference.
It's exactly right. And as a medical reporter, I know that resonates with you. And that's why the work is so important. And yeah, those are the things that do make the difference. And you want people to realize that, that that's what the end goal is here, is not to, some of these other things, that not to be famous, not to be a star.
No, I like that part.
You did like that part. But
Especially the restaurant part, eating for free in restaurants. That
Oh,
was
now
it.
that I never see, this is the thing. I was never, talk about almost famous. I wasn't even almost famous. I never was. I never got the free food gig.
yeah,
That's
Yeah.
Free food gig did not suck.
did not suck.
yeah.
So you were teaching journalism too, right? So where did you do that?
So I
Georgetown.
Georgetown.
Yeah, at Georgetown, and that was really fun too. And I would say I've been involved in at my alma mater this mentoring program where we pull alumni and connect them with current future journalists who are students right now. And those interactions, it's always like, oh gosh, I got this thing I got to do tonight, and go meet up with everybody. And then when you get there, and then when you do the teaching, or teach the class, or review AP style, or whatever it is so inspiring and so fun to see these young people excited about what's next, or just really early on in their journalism journey, which again sounds super hokey, but it's true. It's just, I always feel like I get more out of it as a mentor than I would imagine the mentee or the student does, because it's super inspiring. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I haven't taught in a while, but I definitely would be open to it in the future. I think it
How
could
do
be
you
fun.
think the young people, like, what do they see journalism? How do they see journalism? Are they excited about it? Are they also nervous about it?
Well, it's
Because
different too.
because
All these
sometimes
teaching
Yeah,
different.
you can be a
so
target these days as a journalist, I mean, there's
exactly.
especially female journalists are getting, it's horrifying.
It
what's
is.
happening.
It so is. And so there's a lot of training for folks that are interested in going into conflict reporting. There are a lot of good ways to prepare those kinds of reporters who are looking for that work. The other thing that I find really interesting is I've noticed that a lot of students these days, journalism students, are interested in what I would call like advocacy journalism. They're more interested in kind of, not necessarily a bad thing, but like telling the story of nonprofits, for example, like, and so what is positive in all of that is that frequently those kinds of students will go end up being storytellers, not necessarily in a traditional medium, but for the American Cancer Society's Action Network, or whatever the case may be. So I would say that's one big difference. I do think that the academic framework needs to take some steroids and really grow into what we were talking about earlier, what it is to be a reporter on TikTok, what's involved, and understanding, who are the people who are putting the feeds in for Snapchat, and countless other apps that you and I don't even know. Okay, maybe you guys know, but I don't.
I know.
No.
One clue for the parents out there listening is once your kids let you follow them on something, they are clearly on to the next thing.
Right.
Like you're like, oh yeah, I'll friend you. They're like, that was
Or-
Facebook was so 5 years ago. So they're now into something I don't even
Oh
know.
yeah,
what
our
it is.
daughter doesn't even know how to. She told me the other day she doesn't know how to use Facebook. I'm like, it's not. If I can do it, it's not that hard.
Like, I don't know Facebook.
And she's an influencer, or
Yeah.
a content creator, or whatever the
Yeah, but
current
she
term
doesn't
is.
create content for Facebook. She's
Like,
that's like
doing-
I don't even
yeah.
know how to do
TikTok
it.
and Instagram, but that's the other thing. If they let you follow them, they may have what they used to call a Finsta, a fake Instagram. So that's where their real content is.
See,
real
Kat's
friend.
got the scoop. She's got the
Yeah.
intel. Finsta. I didn't even know that.
Finsta. So yeah, if you have, and that's old, it's probably called something new now. And
Yeah, so
God
I'll
knows what your
text my daughters and I'll be like, okay, what's your Finsta? And they'll be like,
What's your
Mom,
Finsta?
you're embarrassing me.
Mom, that's so 5 years ago.
Whatever.
So what happened? Okay, so you wrapped up at Channel 7, and then you do business. How did you become a business beat reporter? Did you know a lot about business?
Not at all, Mark. It was like oh my gosh. So this is also really funny. So what I kind of pretended was, I was like, look, you need somebody who's like, can really speak in layperson terms. That's me.
That's good.
I don't know anything about business. I'm your man.
That's how you got in. You're like, you
I'm
need
like,
someone who doesn't really know a lot because they will talk way too detailed.
I think that should be your bio on your Twitter.
maybe
don't
we
know
could work on
shit.
this from like the branding standpoint, you know, like in further conversation, somehow to fold this in. She knows nothing and it works.
And that's why
Right.
she can explain it to you.
But that's brilliant. That is brilliant because that's what I mean. We keep explaining to clients, and we keep when we were doing interviews when we were reporting or whatever, you know, say it in English, say it simple, explain it to me like, you know, it's like that line from Philadelphia with Denzel Washington. Explain it to me like I'm a second grader or fourth grader, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're able to do. You're able to translate, you know, things that people sometimes can't decipher for for can't figure out. They tune it out. I'll find the words. Okay.
No, what I would say is, for example, so on the stations that we were on, it was originally, there's the kind of the CBS legacy stations. So in the DC area, WTOP, in New York, 1010 Wins, WCBS in LA, KNX in Chicago,
These are all
WBBM.
powerhouses.
So all like kind of these big legacy stations, they would contract out with, it used to be Market Watch. And so I was on the Market Watch team, which was owned by Wall Street Journal. And we would dip in and provide a market update. So those stations are being played, for example, in New York, a cab driver is listening, you know, or a Lyft driver is listening in Manhattan. You need to be able to speak to that person as well as to a trader who may be, you know, in their car listening for traffic or whatever the case is. So it truly is that you need to understand what you're reporting on. And so it kind of helped just to learn it and then to be able to translate it. So I enjoyed it more than when I at first was like, oh my God, this is what it's come to. I'm going to be doing business news for ultimately the Wall Street Journal. Oh my God, you know. And Jim's laughing. My husband's like, yeah, you know, you're not exactly the cerebral type. I don't know how this is going to go. He's like, okay, don't let him know. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like hiding, you know, kind of under my desk, like kind of shuffling in, hoping nobody sees me. But it did work out well. And I did learn a lot about markets. And in all seriousness, I do think that our kids and through the public education system need to have a better grasp of what, you know, what the markets are, what's being traded, you know, just some kind of personal finance pieces that are important that are getting glossed over. But and then I got laid off again. So I got laid off from Channel 7, budget cuts. And then what happened with Wall Street Journal Market Watch was they sold all of the stations, the CBS stations, which then became Entercom, to Bloomberg. And Bloomberg stepped in, and this was in 2014, and hired some of the people who were the anchors previously. And so when we went in for interviews, having been laid off from Channel 7, I was like, I will do anything. What do you need? You know, I'm like, I got it, you know. And so they wanted the jobs to be in New York. And so I agreed to relocate, which was crazy, but exciting to be in Manhattan, you know, doing that work and working at Bloomberg headquarters.
Wow.
But the city is really a young person's game and a wealthy person's game. And I was neither. So my husband and I, we were like in this, he was working at Columbia. So we kind of relocated and, you know,
You
it's
guys
like
do any like community colleges, or you just got the big ones?
So it was like college, Mark. It was like college, and not in a good way. We had one bathroom. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to tell you, after 30 years of marriage, we're not sharing a bathroom. Okay, no, it's a no for me on that. And so just like I pulled the trigger on Syracuse, we kind of mutually agreed, okay, we got to get back out of the city. And luckily, Bloomberg invested in the station here in DC, WNEW. And so now there's 4 Bloomberg O&Os in addition to all those, the syndication team, they called it, all those legacy stations I mentioned before, and did that up until January of this year, when I kind of, you know, graduated from the kids table and went over to the print side of the building, and where I've been doing headline writing and blasts and kind of covering different things. So it's been amazing.
But getting fired is part of the gig. I mean, you just, or getting laid
Laid
off
off.
or whatever.
No,
Yeah.
it was, I considered it fired, and I was so, I mean, it was like crushing. Like I was like crying, like, I mean, and I remember people saying, you're gonna look back and you're gonna think this is such a good thing. And I was like, give me a break. How could this ever be a good thing? And it happens. You realize that it just forces the change that you need. I would
Mhm.
never have learned about the things that, I learned in terms of radio and business news, and and what I'm learning now in terms of the nuance of truly like headline writing, it's fascinating. The book thing is just kind of like it kind of funded the ability to do that. You know what I mean? Because it was during the pandemic, so it was like, okay, I'm going to just pull back now on my time. Your kids grow up eventually, so again, parents listening, there will be a day when you'll have your life back, and can do all the things.
Well,
And
that's
they-
what I was going to ask. You go from headline writing to then writing a book, which is very, very different than really than journalism. Really, I mean, it's completely different. So how
different.
did
It's
you
a different
decide-
writing style even.
Yeah,
It
and
is. It so is.
how did you decide to do this, and why did you choose this story, or do you feel like this story chose you?
That's such a good question. I do feel like it chose me. I felt very much like Ethel Rosenberg, and for the people who may not be familiar with the case, it was in the 50s, and she was very much, the Rosenbergs were very much scapegoated. He was a spy for the Soviets. It was kind of the beginning of the Cold War, and there was no evidence against her. The only evidence against her was her brother testified against her to save his own skin. And I saw basically a 60 minutes interview with him in which he said that Bob Simon was the guy interviewing him, and then they repackaged it, and Anderson Cooper. I always invert that. It was interviewing, showing the same clip, and because the Ethel and Julius Rosenberg's two sons were making a case to try to get her name exonerated, and the brother, Ethel's brother, admitted that he testified against his sister because in the direct quote was, "Well, I don't sleep with my sister," meaning they were going to go after his wife. So he said, my sister is a spy, and they put those people to death. I mean, the case I just find fascinating. There's so many different betrayals that occur. She was betrayed by her mother when you learn about kind of her origin story. And she was betrayed by the system. I don't think she got a fair shake from a judicial standpoint at all. So I was really drawn into the story, and for like a year or two, I just read everything I could get my hands on. And I realized that all of the stuff focused on the legal case and on Julius Rosenberg. And I didn't feel like that her perspective was being told, and how she was just she really was just, Roy Cohn factors into this thing. He was,
Doesn't he always?
he was like, there's a quote from him where he's like, I didn't need to see any evidence. I could see it in her eyes that she was guilty. I sat in the courtroom with her and I could see it in her eyes. I'm like, you're an assistant attorney general. What the heck? Like kind of my moment where I was just like, this is insane. What do you mean you don't need any evidence? You're like a top law enforcement officer in the country, crazy. But anyway, so that's also been just, so I really enjoyed that, writing that, and kind of the flipping for writers. I would tell you, every single person listening to this podcast at this moment has a book in them. And that includes you too. You guys, you have amazing stories to tell. And it was always kind of a lifelong dream of mine. I ended up going with a hybrid publisher. And so I would just encourage anybody to Google that and, email me, let's write together, let's do stuff, let's get it done, because it can happen. And there's a really important stories that need to be told. And so, yeah, so for me, I just was so excited about it. I love it.
So so the book comes out, and then do you go promote it? Do you?
Yeah, and see, this is again where we're going to have an offline conversation. maybe with your daughter, you could hook me up, because I it's kind of became like, I was supposed to be on social media talking about it, and I did not enjoy that as much as I did enjoy the writing and the contemplating of it. I didn't like the promoting of it, quite frankly. I mean, some of the things I
Well,
did,
it goes against your
Journalistic
journalistic,
nature.
which is, not to march in the, with the people in the protest.
But also
go back to what you're
exactly,
talking about.
exactly right.
the
Right.
journalist doesn't want to be the center of the story. The journalist is the storyteller. So it's against everything about you to be the center of it,
Oh
even
my
if you're
God.
telling another story.
Yes, you guys, that is just such an eye opener for me, because I've been like struggling with it. The book came out in April of 21, and next year it'll be, 70 years, I think. Yeah, since 53 when they were executed. And I have struggled with it. And now I was invited on a panel at a synagogue in Northwest. And I mean, I've had different, Jewish women's groups that I've talked with that I've really enjoyed it. And that I'm happy to engage on the content. But you're exactly right. I think that's why I've resisted it. And I don't enjoy it. Like, I'm happy to look at cute family pictures, but it's like but anyway, so that's the story with that. I definitely need to, you just kind of want the work to stand for itself, and like, okay, if it means something to somebody, great. And if not, it was cathartic for me
It was
to go through
an
it.
honor to tell that story.
100%. Yes.
Yeah, it's an honor to tell people's stories and to people. I don't know if people understand that aspect.
I agree. And Kathy, let me just interrupt to say that her sons, the older one, Michael Mirapool, I've communicated with him a couple of times, and he is just incredible. And I mean, I just like have so much admiration and respect for, and the brother is started a foundation. All they do, the Rosenberg Fund for Children, all they do is raise and distribute money for children of activists who are basically prisoners of conscience, who are perhaps wrongfully held, or held because of their ideas and their ideals.
Wow.
Did he change his last name?
So they were adopted after the
right.
Rosenbergs were executed. They were adopted by Abe and Anne, I believe her name is Anne Mirapool. And this is crazy. Mirapool was the writer of Strange Fruit, and they were very liberal-minded people who lived in New York City during that time. And so they adopted the two sons, and
Wow.
it's crazy. Yeah.
What's the name of the book?
It's called Betrayal, the Ethel Rosenberg Story.
And where can people find it?
They can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the usual places. And
Go buy that book.
and I hope it resonates with folks. And even if it doesn't, and you want to tell a story, or you have an idea for a book, reach out to me, and I can, because I'm researching some about hybrid publishing. I'm thinking of going a different direction for my next project.
When you say hybrid publishing, meaning what?
So a lot of times, self-publishing, you kind of think of it as a vanity project a little bit, like, and I don't have that kind of money anyway to go in and just fund the book yourself.
You work for Bloomberg Business. You got to get some,
some
inside trading things quick.
This is what, see, again, the cynic over there, Mark, like, hey, you got to get some good trades under your belt.
A few tips. That's
go
all.
back up to Chicago, and
then you
do
can write
some
about,
deals.
Or you could just pass them on to me and then work something
Wait
out.
a minute, yeah.
she can write her next book from jail. She'll have time on her hands.
But she'll have money.
But it wasn't like Simon and Schuster, they were blowing up my phone to say, hey, we really want you to write this book. So for people who I wanted the credibility of a publisher, but I didn't have the opportunity, or the entree to a publishing house that others would have had. So with the hybrid publishing, you basically get a publisher. It is kind of somewhere in between. So you do some crowdfunding to raise the money to produce the book. And this is one of the ways that Amazon has changed the world, is that you don't have to have like a minimum run. I was like, well, how many do I have to kind of sell? And it's one. It doesn't work like that. You basically upload the contents of the book into the cloud, and then Amazon publishes it 1 or 2 or 25,000 or whatever it ends up being.
Or 50,000. So how,
50,000.
your mom was, did she like, your parents are your biggest fans. Like, what did
Oh my God, my mom was just like, she thinks I'm brilliant. You guys wouldn't believe it. I'm like, I should have her do my PR because, she's just like, oh, and
my
dad,
daughter, a publisher,
she's
an author.
she's an author, my famous author. And I'm like, okay. Anyway, it was, it was really fun I would write, and she was kind of my frontline editor. And
that's sweet.
she's an English teacher and therapist later in her career. And so she was great. She gave me great feedback. And I would just say my dad was also helpful. He's the Chicago guy, very kind of like Mark would suggest, Tasani was my maiden name. And so he was very much like, all right, we got to figure out how you're going to sell this book. We got to, how are we going to do it? So, and my dad passed away over the summer. And so I've been really grieving that. Yeah, it's just horrible. But I'm really particularly grateful that the book was published before he passed, and that we had that connection.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, that's very nice. Yeah, sorry to hear about your dad. I knew that we talked
a little bit offline.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all these amazing stories. This has been really fun.
Quite a journey.
You've had like so many chapters of your life. I can't wait to read about the next one.
Thank
any
you.
ideas where you're going next, or who knows?
I'm
She's
open.
happy where she is in case her bosses are listening.
Yes.
Loves where she is.
I love where I am. I love my employer. If anything, I've been thinking about maybe writing about my dad, but I'm just kind of, we'll see where it goes. But I do want to say thank you so much to you, Kathy, to you, Mark, not just for including me, but more importantly for this important project that you're doing. It means a lot, and I'm really grateful and honored to be a part of your podcast. And so, cheers to you, and thank you for doing the hard work.
Thank you. So how does everybody get in touch with you? What can you have some social handles or
it's just
or anything?
Yep, that would be great. It's my handle is at Alisa, Alisa Parenti, Parenti. So at Alisa Parenti, and I'm on LinkedIn. Everything pretty much by my name on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the places. And my email is just my whole name at gmail.com. And I am serious about anybody who's interested in writing. I'd love to research with you and help get books published, because I think we need these stories out there. Thank you.
And the book, once again, is Betrayal, the Ethel Rosenberg story. Get it wherever you get your favorite books.
Thank you, guys.
And she's a journalist who reads, which is important.
All journalists have to read. They have to read everything. Journalists don't always write that.
Skim. I think most journalists skim.
No, that's true. We do skim.
Bullet points. What do we put in every news release, every pitch? Bullet points. Make it. They have 2 seconds to read this.
Because all good journalists have to have a little ADD in them, or they can't possibly.
Right? Exactly.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Us. It's been
Appreciate
a privilege.
It's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow, that was pretty amazing. I think anybody who wanted to know about news or wants to become a journalist probably learned a lot, or wants to become an author.
Quite a journey there. I mean, she went to Chicago, she went to DC, she went to New York. It's taken some turns.
DC.
Yeah. Covering news, covering breaking news, covering business news, faking it till you make it. I mean, and really touching that story about the family that wanted to keep the woman alive until she had the kid. That's very, that stuff sticks with you.
It does.
And that shows what a good reporter.
Right. And why real journalists get into the business. They want to make a difference. And those stories that they tell, it's important to them to get it right, and to have an impact. If you enjoyed what you just heard and want to hear more of our interviews with incredible journalists across the country, be sure to follow us on social media at On the Mark Media, and subscribe to After Deadline, the media podcast, anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, which we hope this will become one of them. Until next time, we'll catch up with you after deadline.
I thought I was trying to get in on there.
Gosh, whatever.